I don't have a background in fashion except for just always being an artist and, learning how to market, learning how something goes from being a product to being photographed to being translated visually. And I learned that through modeling. And so, we end up with all of these interesting experiences in our lives that seem so disconnected. But when we look at it, it can be that the constellation of things that we uniquely have in our life can connect to a very real need in the world.
Welcome to How We Change the World podcast. I'm your host, Deborah Rowan, and here we engage in long-form conversations with individuals taking bold steps to reject a world of demise and suffering, instead doing all they can to create a more beautiful world of hope and possibility. My guest today, Leanne Mai-ly Hilgart, is a breath of fresh air and a force to be reckoned with. A former international high fashion model, Leanne took her love of fashion, her commitment to protect animals, and her fierce desire to protect the environment, and she wove all those together in her own unique way to make the world better. In so doing, she founded the first high-couture outerwear line using no-waste materials and no animal products. Right out of the gate, she landed a spot in New York's Fashion Week, winning over the press with accolades from fashion, business, and animal rights publications, including a breaking news coverage from CNN. A couple months ago, Leanne launched a new business called Humans We Love, bringing that same high couture styling, ethical standards, and no-waste values to wedding dresses, evening gowns, dresses, and jewelry. Leanne is brilliant, beautiful, and strong, and I'm pretty sure she will become a human you love. So if you would be so kind as to please just take a few seconds, press that subscribe button. It truly makes all the difference. And now please just enjoy this conversation between me and Leanne Mai-ly Hilgart. Hi, Leanne. How are you?
Hi, Deb. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to meet you. Actually, I'm thrilled to meet you. I've been hearing your name, seeing your work for many years, and now I've got the genuine article here, so I'm honored. I love what you do. I love what you do, and I'm excited to share it with people.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Well, so let's just jump right into it. You're the founder of two amazing businesses. Well, I think the first one is pronounced Vote Couture.
That's right.
I have to be very careful, which is like a high-tech, innovative brand that you had with a goal, I think, of ending animal agriculture was the drive behind that.
In fashion.
And pardon? And innovation?
Animal agriculture in fashion, yes.
Oh, yes, of course, in fashion. And now with Humans We Love, which you just recently launched, I think people are going to lose their minds over that. I just keep looking at it, and I can tell you, I don't have a fashion gene in my body. I love it, but I can't do it.
I don't believe that. Just
no.
Looking at you right now, I can tell you that's not true.
Well, you can see like 2 inches of me, so no, it's not my forte, but I love it, and I've seen your work, and I can recognize something very high level when I see it in terms of fashion. Sometimes, usually I can. So anyway, I just, congratulations on that. I want you to, if we don't mind, just start with like maybe a short description of both of those businesses. I know one is no longer in operation, I don't think, but
yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and just...
In 2008, I wanted to figure out how I could serve animals and help them, and do it in a way that wasn't being done, because that's how I could be most useful. I had been getting my MBA, and I was modeling in Hong Kong, and I started to look at every idea that I thought could meet a need. I was really into, I read this book by Deepak Chopra, and I think it was the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. And I read this in like 2007, so I can't really remember exactly all the details, but I remember one thing was like, sorry, my dog wants to hang out right now.
Oh, please.
One of the things he said was, where your skills meet the needs of the world is abundance. And so
Ooh.
I had to really think about that equation, like where was it that I and my life and the things that had happened to me, the things that I had gotten good at, or the resources that I had, how could those help make the world a better place? And so, a lot of people had been helping animals through food, and I'd already been vegan for years by then. And I went vegetarian when I was 10 years old and was an activist my whole life, making art and selling it door to door to raise money for the animal shelter and fighting for a law to give all students in Illinois the right to not dissect. They were dissecting cats across the hall when I was in high school.
Oh, I'm sorry. And the right to do what?
To have an alternative to dissection.
Oh,
dissection was
really?
Required if you took a class with dissection in it. And so I started working on a campaign that then helped change this bill into law. I was not the initiator of the bill.
But how old were you then? Was that high school or college?
I was 16, yeah.
Oh, you're 16. Wow.
Yeah. And so it's always been my life is like, how can I help animals and really shed light on what they're going through, especially in a systemic way? What are the ways that our world has created systems of exploitation due to a desire for profit and competition and to lower costs, et cetera? Not a desire to hurt. I don't think anyone ever wants to create a hurtful system.
But it can be ignored in the face of profits.
It's just absolutely. And through all of the things that, in terms of us industrializing everything, turning everything into a factory, we forget that animals are living beings and they are not cogs in a machine.
Yeah.
And so I had just gone to school to get my MBA because I wanted to start a business to help animals. And I had thought about outerwear because I'm from Chicago and we have really cold winters. And I just didn't think there was a market for it. I didn't think that there were enough people who cared, but also loved fashion like I did, until I realized that if I could start a business where the coats are better, they are an improvement and an innovation on what was conventionally available for anyone who wants a warm, stylish coat,
regardless of their take on animal fashion. Okay.
That's right. Regardless of them even realizing that what they wear makes an impact. If I could figure that out, then I knew that we would have a way of saving animals with every single coat we make, and also having the secondary activism of then just being able to remind people of their power. That as a person who is in this world, when you buy anything, when you support the restaurants you support every day, the grocery stores, the makers, the artists, Amazon, whatever it is that people are putting their money and energy into, that is a very real vote for the world that
voting
we are
every
creating.
Minute of our lives, really. Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So that to me was really exciting because I don't have a background in fashion except for just always being an artist and, learning how to market, learning how something goes from being a product to being photographed to being translated visually. And I learned that through modeling. And so, we end up with all of these interesting experiences in our lives that seem so disconnected. But when we look at it, it can be that the constellation of things that we uniquely have in our life can connect to a very real need in the world. And then we can serve in a way that no one else has that same map to do. So that is how I started Vote in 2008.
I just absolutely love the way you described that entire process and what you recognized. Because honestly, even people who care don't get to that level. And I'm thinking of my own self. I was thinking about this when you're talking about dissection, how just in 8th grade, I think it was, we first had to dissect something and I was so upset. Yeah. And I wasn't even a strong animal lover, like, many other people just start that way. But it never occurred to me, and I know the world has changed, but it never occurred to me that I could actually get out of it or that I could actually ask my school to stop it. So what do you think it was in you in particular that gave you that type of, other than the whole zeitgeist, I think has changed and where people do now start to speak up where they didn't before, like just generationally. Yeah. Still though, what was it about you or your upbringing, or is it just your nature, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, at the time I was growing up in the Chicago suburbs in the 90s. So like it was a very different time than it is now for sure. The first
That's
time I
true.
tried to not dissect, my teacher wanted to punish me by giving me a 40-page paper instead that I needed to research versus an hour-long dissection class because I refused to do that. So he was
Wow.
like, let's make sure
Yeah.
that this is a lesson for everyone,
Right.
So like, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think growing up, I'm lucky that I come from two very interesting kind of rebellious people.
Yeah.
They weren't into animal rights at all. My dad grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. My mom grew up in Taiwan, Taipei, eating tons of animals. But my mom traveled across the world, moved to Chicago, and became a pediatrician. My dad grew up on a farm, but he was always looking at the stars. And I think that even though they didn't really understand why I didn't want to eat animals anymore, or they thought it was a phase when I first got into
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah.
But I think like they did allow me to think for myself, and even if it meant like sometimes that made me popular with the other kids. Sometimes it made me a complete outcast. But I think that they always, whether it made it so that I cried every night because I felt so isolated, or it meant that I was popular for a year, they did encourage me to be myself. And that meant, I was like wearing clothes I found at garage sales to like coordinate the like looks, and cutting my own hair and making my own jewelry, in grade school. And like, it was not cool. It sounds cool, but it was not
well,
cool.
no, but I didn't think about it as cool or not cool. I just think about it as who you are, and that you have to listen to your inner voice, like regardless of what the outcome is, whether you're popular, you're not popular.
Yeah.
And that it's just a strength of character. So that's what it took. But then you have no fashion background, and you decide to start a fashion line other than wearing clothes, like you're modeling. So that does give you, obviously, you have a sense of fashion and art and design. But still, to start fashion, you didn't go to FIT or any of the schools.
Yeah.
So how did that happen? How did you start that?
It's a good question. Sometimes they say like what you don't know can serve you just as well as what you do know. And if I knew what I know now, I don't think I would have felt prepared enough to try.
Yeah.
For sure. And I will tell you that so I was modeling in Hong Kong, and when I decided, and I'd already been working on several business plans in my MBA class, and had just not like felt like anything was like the thing, that I was motivated enough to start. And then when I felt like it was right, because I saw a blog thread on Post Punk Kitchen, Issa Chandra Moskowitz.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And it was like everybody looking for like, is this coat vegan and warm? Is this coat vegan and warm? It's just like endless. And I was like, okay, so if someone's going to do this, if someone's going to stand up for animals in fashion, I know what is needed for beautiful outerwear. I've been in Chicago trying to be warm and stylish in the winter for my whole life. And I understand how things are marketed. And I understand, I've always been obsessed. Like I grew up as a kid loving this magazine Zillions, which was like Consumer Reports for kids.
What's it called?
Zillions. It would like have like an ad. There would be like a comic on the very back cover that would just be like showing how they make ads, and they would be like, we make a hamburger and we use glue for the mayonnaise, or like whatever. It's like all the secrets. And so like I was always so into that. And so basically I just, I realized, okay, if someone's going to do it, I better just do it. I better make sure someone does it. And so I figured out that, I just needed to break it down into manageable pieces. And I said, okay, I've been an artist my whole life. I always loved painting and drawing. And that was like my role in class. Like as a kid, I just loved making art. And I was like, okay, I think that fashion is really just art plus business.
Right.
And if I can just figure out like, what are then the translatable elements of business to fashion business? Like how is something made what are the parts of it in terms of materials, then what are the parts of it in terms of construction, and then what are the parts of it in terms of sales, and then marketing, customer service, etc. And it's not as simple as that, but it's one of those things where there's a will, there's a way. You just keep trying, keep experimenting, keep figuring it out. I found a very experienced pattern maker. I found a factory that made uniforms. I found I did a contest where I was like, I didn't trust myself as a designer, even though I was an artist. And I said, if this is a description of the designs that I want in the world, and I want to find an artist who can illustrate that. And then I'll take the illustration that people vote on and turn that into the physical coat with the pattern maker and sample maker. And we keep, there's a whole process after that.
Just
it's
keep working through it.
And you have to try it on someone and figure out all the different elements. And it was just a process.
It worked.
And it worked.
It worked really, really well. Actually, I'm going to read just a couple of quotes that, you know what they are, but because this was how many years from start to the time that you were actually in New York Fashion Week? A couple of years, 3 years?
I launched we officially launched 2010. Okay. And 2013 is when we showed at New York Fashion Week as the first ever vegan fashion brand. Yeah.
And since you're a model, were you able to model your own clothes, or were you running?
Oh, I was so stressed putting on that show, and I put it on in 1 month, which was absurd. That I had a dislocated collarbone, and I had I had a strep throat, and my mom flew in to make sure I could sleep, and there was so much going on that if I had attempted to do anything else,
you'd be
it wouldn't even, I was
who is this woman?
I would have fallen over. I would have fainted the whole time. Yeah, totally.
Well, okay. So here's what people were saying. And I don't know if this was only in response to that fashion week or if this was other things, but so we've got a quote saying that you're I don't know why I have to say female, but game changer, embodying courage, creativity, and conviction. That was Condé Nast. Most influential designer by PETA. That one maybe, isn't shocking, but a mogul without compromising morals by Nylon. I love that one. A mogul without compromising morals. I mean, who wouldn't want that said about them? Breaking History, the Rebel of Fashion Week by CNN of all. That is not where you expect to hear that coming from.
Yeah, actually, so the funny thing about that CNN quote is that, I was running around the fashion district putting together this show on no budget in 1 month that would typically cost $50,000 plus.
Oh, really?
From a massive company. They'd be working on it for 9 months. And so I put it together very, very low budget, very, very small amount of time and team. And CNN called me and they were like, we're doing an article on how popular fur is. And I was like, okay. So we would love for you to just give us a quote as a person who doesn't agree with that. And I was like, okay. So I'm in the garment district, I think at Dean and DeLuca's, stopping to get some work done while I'm on my way to my factory. And so I talked to her for a minute, but I just can't help but tell her, I think she asks me why did you start your brand? And I start telling her about it. Mm-hmm. And we end up talking for an hour. And I'm that really? Seems a little bit odd. I'm why would you talk to someone for an hour for one quote?
Right.
So I don't think anything of it. And then I get to my show and there are, I think, 3 people sent from CNN. There is a CNN photographer and there are 2 reporters. My gosh. And what they ended up doing was the woman was so into the story. She gave away her popular first story to someone else. She wanted to cover the first vegan fashion brand to show at New York Fashion Week instead, sent a photographer who shot incredible images. They put it on the cover of CNN. It was the number one shared fashion article ever at that point.
Unbelievable.
And CNN Breaking News then covered it on their
breaking
news.
Unbelievable. Yeah. This whole story is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Boy, talk about follow your heart. And,
absolutely.
That is because obviously it wasn't just that she already knew that what you did, right? So it wasn't that she was so engaged with that story or they would have led with that. They just wanted to add to another story. Yeah. But because your passion and the way you described it and the way you convinced her, that had to just be everything that was authentically coming from you, changed everything. That's all people want is something real, true, authentic, because there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of greenwashing and whatever,
Yeah, it's true.
you want to call it. So,
Right.
which actually takes me back to the point I was going to get to earlier, which is you're not just vegan for animals, at least that's not my interpretation, but you're also zero waste. And we can talk about that maybe as you lead us into Humans We Love, which is your new
Yeah,
business.
absolutely. Yeah. So the new brand is so Vote was also eco-conscious. I focused on using recycled fibers and organic when possible, when using plant-based fibers.
Mm-hmm.
We recycled like 30 to 40 plastic bottles from the landfill per coat.
Wow.
And so it was a great way to, divert waste and make it also a great high tech alternative to wearing down, so that the coats were super warm.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of our coats were made almost entirely from recycled fibers. But what's exciting about building a bridal and couture brand, which is what Humans We Love is that each piece can be made as a piece of art, and therefore
Oh,
I don't need to have like a lot, like thousands of yards of one specific
I
fabric.
see.
I can have 5 yards that I
Mm-hmm.
find that's dead stock or vintage fabric, and I can make
Hmm.
one gown, or I can find like vintage vegan pearls from Japan, and like I can hand bead them on a dress, because
Wow.
there's only like 50 that were found in someone's basement in wherever, like that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so it's really
Every,
fun.
yeah,
Um,
very
I'm,
fun.
it's really fun to just look at it from a very different perspective of going from a brand that the focus was how do we scale, which was really challenging, scaling with the quality and the ethics both that I had as requirements for the brand. That was the biggest challenge, and a big
Hmm.
reason that I had to close the brand. But now I am looking at, how do I create in a way that's slow fashion. Each piece is a piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and everything is zero waste. So it's also just like, finding very interesting materials and turning them into something really special for someone.
Do you think this zero waste movement, just the mindset that it's sort of out there, did that affect you, or were you really going into it from protection for animals and avoiding animal agriculture or fashion? I don't. What is the term we use? Fashion,
Yeah.
agriculture, using animal.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Avoiding using animals in the fashion equation is usually how I say it,
Okay.
because it's basically like, how do we take animals out of the fashion
Yeah,
equation?
because for so long it took people just didn't even think that you could, and I had the same problem trying to find warm clothing. In Denver, that was because Colorado is freezing too, and I also didn't want to
Absolutely.
use animal products. It's still hard to do. I mean, there is still a huge market out there that needs
I
filling,
know.
but
Yeah,
maybe what you
I
were referring to is just that it is a challenge, and that is why people tend to take a low cost route that doesn't really honor everything that it could honor when making clothing or outerwear, any kind of anything really. But we're talking about fashion today. It's always cheaper to use synthetics, or there's other reasons to use synthetics, which takes oil, which harms the environment, or to use wool or something from where an animal is harmed. So I'm just wondering what came to you in terms of that eco consciousness. Was that just something you picked up, or was that also always in
see.
your in your
Yeah.
in your vision?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's always been in my vision to also consider, how can we be creating a better relationship with the earth, and as
Mm,
well as the workers. So when I was a
yeah.
child, I was creating like recycling programs in my school.
Oh,
So that has always been a big part of my life.
yeah. You are
And
consistent.
yeah,
You're,
to me, it's all
that's
the
good.
same, right?
Yeah,
It's
it
not
is.
like, why would we just care about one thing and not another?
Right. Right.
And I think that, it's similar to the way that everyone has their own way of helping animals. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
also true of like everyone has their own main focus that like is their most passionate focus, but it doesn't mean that there's not room for them to also care about other things and continue to educate themselves, which you know, I'm just always trying to do for myself, and to continue to innovate and find ways to make things that are better that create a better relationship with the earth, you know, that create a better way of us living on this planet.
I mean, I think you just literally hit the nail on the head with that, because what you look at, you'll see a product and they'll perhaps help one thing at the cost of something else, right? And this idea of being able to be so holistic, so circular in your thinking, it kind of shows that you get the bigger picture. And that's what I think we need to communicate so much, is that, well, I mean, this overused phrase that everything is connected, but that everything is. And so you can't, if you're helping the environment, you're helping animals, you're helping humans who are working in factories, you're helping 100%. The air, the sky, you know, and you're helping your soul, you know, so it is so complex and put together. And we've always separated things out so much, starting with the Industrial Revolution. Let's break everything apart and focus on one thing. And now this whole idea of pulling it all together is really, but you're unique still in this being able to pull it off, because it's not easy given our given what's already been created with factories and the
absolutely. I have so much to say about what you just said.
Good.
So I think that, you know, this idea that everything can be broken down and labeled and categorized and whatever reminds me of, I was a philosophy minor in college, and we talked a lot about epistemology, you know, the way that we know things.
Sure.
And we talked about, you know, this general idea and very patriarchal idea that the way we try to live in this world is to control everything. And the only way to control everything is if we break it down into things we can control, and we name them and we categorize them and we map them and we make boundaries and whatever. And it's like, that doesn't mean you own those things. You don't own the earth. You don't own all of these people or these animals, you know, just because you think you can name and categorize them does not mean that you own them. And so then we also talk about feminist epistemology and this idea that like, there is a two-way knowing, that each, like I can know you and you can know me, instead of I can know how much you know, this weighs or what's in here, like how fast I can throw it. But I can never fully know you. You are always changing, and you are knowing me at the same time. And this feminist epistemology concept, which I learned a long time ago, I don't know if it's still even being talked about or what, but this idea
you're talking about it.
I guess I'm talking about it.
That matters. That makes it matter.
Yeah, but it's just like, you know, we instead, I think, you know, we took this entire world and out of fear tried to categorize and break down everything into something we could control, and therefore took out the ethics behind, you know, and the out of business and the pride out of making art and the like livelihood of someone creating something that they love to create. And we turn everyone into a machine, and thinking that efficiency and effectiveness was like the most important thing, the god of business. And there's just such a lag to that. And so like what you're saying, go ahead.
No, keep going.
Okay. And so you're saying about like, you know, us breaking everything down in this way, and really keeping it all separate. I think that is the same thing that happens where people go like, oh, well, you have to pick a topic you care about. Like, why do you care about more than one thing? And it's like, well, here's the thing. Like, I've been petitioning for this ballot initiative in Oregon because I just moved to Portland. And the ballot initiative is around giving protection to all animals, not just to dogs and cats. And people will say, what about the farmers? And I'll say, actually, the farmers are treated really badly too. Like they think it's one or the other. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like I learned from watching Food Incorporated, and I had no idea. I was an animal rights activist by that point, whenever that came out in 2000 something. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, this isn't, the farmers are like, they're all treated like indentured servants. They're under so much debt that they're put into because of, you know, the big agriculture. that then they have no freedom to leave. And they're put through so much violence when they're experiencing like harming and killing these animals. So they have so much trauma. It's like one of the most dangerous jobs there is. And so when people are like, wait, but what about the people? I'm like, yeah, this is actually a way to just say, we're taking this whole categorical way that we've been incorrectly thinking we're going to be safer by creating factories for farms and making people and animals into cogs and the earth into a cost. And instead saying, there's going to be a better way. And that better way is going to be better for everyone. It's going to be better for the animals. It's going to be better for the humans. They're going to have a livelihood that is not violent. They're going to have a livelihood where they're not servants to these big agricultural companies. And they're going to have a livelihood that they can enjoy and be proud of. So
I think your next career may be in politics, or at least I hope it is, because you have a great, I know, well, because that's what we need though, is someone who can look at a holistic view of the world and what we ultimately need. And maybe it's not on a city by state by country level, but it's really a global level. So I'm not sure what it is, but I think you see it so well. And I do think more people are starting to see things more fully. I keep using the word holistically, but I don't know how else to describe something that incorporates, because I've had, this podcast is called How We Change the World. And a lot of people say, well, you need to get a little more niche, like talk about vegan food or talk about human rights or something. And I'm like, but why? Because every single thing leads into every single thing else. And it does make it harder to put into sound bites perhaps, but it is all that we have to see the threads that continually go through all of this to really get it. Yeah.
And I think too, like, to say if you want to focus on vegan food is a very concrete category, but to say that you want to focus on how do people change the world, it is a very niche thing. You're not saying, how did you start your business? It's not like any business. It's like, how does a human make a positive impact? Exactly. And that is very specific, because not everybody is trying. That's not just not everybody's goal,
No, it's not, for sure.
So,
but what we see though, and what the driver behind the podcast and is not dissimilar from the driver behind all your efforts, is that we've tried the breaking it down into all its components. We went through the Industrial Revolution and we saw what happens, and we tried to. I would add to your assessment of it being fear-based that it's so profit-based as well. And those two things, and maybe profit is a fear of, I was going to say, so it's profit's like a fear of not having enough. Yeah.
Exactly.
Or that we have to have more in our country or in our race or in our whatever than you do in yours. And so, so it does all sort of come back together. So, we will see how many people we can get on team everything. That is still very niche. Yeah. One thing I wanted to kind of ask you to speak about a little bit is, I don't know if I want to say imposter syndrome, but when you start something that you've never done before, you were talking about, I think you called it female, to look at the world through what women have experienced. Go ahead. What was the word you?
Feminine epistemology.
Epistemology. You say it.
Yeah.
I know it, but I'm having trouble.
Word.
Epistemology.
Yeah.
But a lot of women have suffered from imposter syndrome as they go to start new businesses, but particularly in a field, and men do as well. But it has been. I have seen it more in females, at least from my own personal perspective. And I'm wondering if how you overcame that, not as a woman per se, because you're very strong in that, but as a person who's never had a business before and just said, okay, I'm maybe going to be looked at as somebody who doesn't know this field. I haven't been to. How did you overcome that?
Great question.
Feeling?
I probably have a lot of answers for this question. This feels like it could be like its own podcast, its own topic, but because I still like deal with imposter syndrome as I'm like building a new thing and building a few new things, and it doesn't go away. But I think what it is that there has to be something greater, something bigger than your fear of how it looks or your fear of if you're enough. It has to be that I knew that if I didn't do it, if I didn't start Vote, if I didn't start the first like official vegan apparel brand that was like, we are creating something that is better than wearing animals.
Right.
If I didn't say I need to do this, then I would have been paralyzed by, wait, do I know enough? What else do I need to figure out? Who should I hire? I don't have the money to hire them. Shoot, what should I, there's a million things that can stop you. And that there's a great book that I carried around with me at the time. It's Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art.
I love Stephen Pressfield, and I love that book.
It's so good. Yeah. I'm not
all the resistance, the resistance. Yeah.
Totally. And there's a million excuses that we can always have, right? But I remember too, around the same time, I saw this tiny documentary, and it was about how all these people had gotten laid off during the recession. And when they got laid off, a bunch of people were like, well, I can't start anything because XYZ. They have a million excuses. And somebody else was like, but I don't have any other thing I have to do right now. So like, why not at least try, you know? And I think like, I could tell you that I knew that I didn't know what I needed to know. Yeah. But I knew that I had to do it. So go ahead.
It's your why. You knew your why.
That's right.
100 million%. There was no question about it.
Yes. And I knew that I could figure things out. I had started many, like I never started any. I think I tried to sell like my art, like I said, as a kid, but I had never started a real business. I had started a dog walking business when I was like 12, It
all adds up.
Yeah.
You know how to work with customers. I mean, it does build on each other. Yeah.
Sure. But I was never like the person who was like figuring out a way to make $1,000 on a Saturday. Like I was not like a business girl, that was never my goal. I was like starting a group in college that was at Chicago Animal Care 3 times a week and running vegan meat outs in the college quad. And like, I was working 40 hours a week on that in addition to my schooling, unpaid, obviously. And I was used to that kind of work. And
I know the feeling.
And I know
all my life.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like, if you will do something, whether you get paid or not, whether people get it or not, whether whatever or not, then you just diligently move towards it, And I think like, for me, it was like, the world needs this and I am going to do it. So I will just have to figure it out. Yeah. And I think there was no room for me to worry. The fear and the like embarrassment of the things I didn't know, there was no room for that. And I also had picked like, this is what I was going to say earlier. When you were like, how do you start a fashion brand with no background in fashion? The thing is that, okay, so when I started it was the summer 2008. And I was like, I'm going to launch.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's when the recession just started to hit. So
absolutely.
You totally did that. Yeah. Okay. You're one of those people.
I started right during the recession.
Oh, wow.
And so, but when I started, it was fascinating because I was like, I've got to launch it by this fall, because if I don't launch it by this fall, like I just won't have enough momentum to keep going.
Wow.
And a fashion brand typically takes a year just to develop a new collection, not to start a new company, not to have brand new fabrics that have not been used before, not to do an entirely new business that you've never done before, not to
or anyone has done.
Yeah. So I was so oblivious. And that level, though, of pressure that I put on myself, which I would not wish upon someone else and would not put on myself now. But that level of pressure made it so that I couldn't second guess any decisions I made. I just had to keep going one thing after another, decide this, do this, just endless lists of things. And just every day redesigning, re-strategizing, given what the current inputs were until we were live. And it ended up taking me a whole extra 9 months after that, because the first collection I created, I knew it wasn't the right thing. It wasn't finished. And I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
And so embarrassed to tell everybody.
That's a big part of it, being embarrassed.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
But we got to
absolutely.
just, you have to go anyway, right?
Yeah, totally.
But you made it. How long did it finally take you then to get that first line out, the first
Yeah.
series of articles?
So what ended up happening was, I ran out of the little bit of savings that I used to create the website with these lovely two guys in Missouri, who I'd found on Seth Godin's blog. I don't know if you know Seth, the amazing marketing guru. And they were lovely, and I worked with them on the website, but I was still like not launched yet because the collection wasn't right. And I had contacted Farm Sanctuary to do the first photo shoot with them because the impetus was to save sheep. And I felt like nobody knew what was happening to sheep. Like everyone just thought it was a haircut.
Yeah.
They still don't. They don't understand that all factory farming, which is what 98% of where all of our animal agriculture and fashion comes from, at least, that all of it has cruel processes just by way of the fact that it is a focus on effectiveness and on efficiency. And therefore, they're being factory farmed, they're being dragged around, they're having things sliced to be as as getting as much volume of material from them as possible. And they're slaughtered in the end. So it's like a cruel life, but then leads to suffering anyway, and then leads to killing them after oftentimes live export to then slaughter them for their halal meat. So anyway, so sheep were my very favorite. And I felt like very, very unprotected, very misunderstood. And I went to Farm Sanctuary, and there was a woman who at the time was their like celebrity events liaison, Chloe Jo Davis. And she still has a really popular vegan newsletter blog called Girly Girl Army. And she heard what I was doing, and she knew that nobody had done it before. So she was like, oh my gosh. And so she reached out to me. She's like, do you mind if I post about this? And I was like, well, I don't, it's July. It was like 100 degrees out. I'm like, I don't have, it's not ready yet. She's like, we'll just put it up. And people from that post asked if they could pre-order.
Were there photos? So she took photos of the actual garments.
I had done a photo shoot with the samples.
With the garments. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I had done, I had made the samples, but because they were like brand new fabrics that I was working with Polar Tech, and like they weren't even in the finished colors or whatever. I don't even know. I didn't wonder if that blog post still exists, but she put it up. So lovely. People were asking, can I pre-order?
Wow.
And in my mind, I thought I need to do a production run based off of wholesale orders. That's how people do fashion. This is how people do fashion. They do wholesale orders. But all of the shops were closing because it was the bottom of the recession. So like the sustainable shops that I had called, they were all like, well, we don't know. We're not buying, blah, 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 et cetera. And I was like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so I think that this is where the fact that I didn't go to fashion school was a huge benefit, because if I had gone to fashion school, I would have been like, at that time, no one was doing direct to consumer for their own brands. Everybody had to go through department stores and retail shops. 2008,
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this makes sense. I'm like, someone pre-orders a coat. I actually thought if I give them a discount, whatever they deposit, I'll give them a matching discount. So if they put down $50, I'll give them $50 off. This is how I set it up.
Very smart. Yeah.
Thanks. What ended up happening was people were like, oh, well, then I'm just going to put on 50%. And then they got a wholesale price.
Oh, you didn't have a limit?
Oh, no. It ended up being perfect, actually, because basically it turned out that my pre-order customers were my wholesale, essentially. They were like my group of wholesale orders. And it covered the cost then to make their coat and the original starting cost to make someone else's coat.
This is
brilliant.
And
I did the whole first production run off of this. It was so fun.
Have you taught this to anyone? Have you shared this, your information? Because no, seriously, this whole point that you just made, that had you gone to fashion school, had you known how it was supposed to work, you never would have taken the steps, that you wouldn't have been innovative. And that the knowledge can sometimes be an innovation killer, because you're like, no. We all know that doesn't work. We all know we have to use wool. We all know we have to use wholesalers.
Yeah.
But you weren't doing any of that, and it worked fantastically, and gave you the money to produce your first set of products,
my first production run. Yeah. So we wouldn't have launched if I had I'd gone to fashion school and I'd been like,
so many lessons,
need to follow this business plan. I didn't even write a business plan for Vote. I had written business plans for 5 other businesses before Vote, which I didn't launch. And by the time I started Vote, I had it in my head. These are the things I need to strategize.
Okay.
But I was able to improvise, which was very needed at that time with the recession, because things don't, I used to always think that it's like, in that golf saying that's like, you have to play the ball as it lays in real life.
Yeah.
I don't golf. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But
I tried, and you don't want to hear about it, but
okay.
I do know the phrase.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, you can't just like pretend you're in a simulator and there's no wind and there's no whatever. It's like,
right.
No, it's
the real world.
You have to play as it is now. And so I remember every day I just had my notebook out and I'd be like, okay, well, that didn't work. Like that shop I called that I was sure was going to take an order, like they're going out of business or whatever. And I'm like, great. Oh, well, Chloe Jo Davis just asked me if I could, do a blog post. Let me think about that. Let's think through that. Like, what does that look like? Oh, that's actually a good idea. I can do this. Maybe I'll set up. We did it in 48 hours. Me and the web guys set up like this, basically pre-order system. And at the time, Kickstarter wasn't really a thing, and Indiegogo was just for films. And I didn't know people were doing like anything like that. But I was like, the math of this, it makes sense.
Yeah.
If people are really willing to buy a coat that's made of something that they have never seen a coat made like this before from a girl they've never met, that they're not going to get for months. If they're cool with that, like,
I'm cool with that.
That's great, And I remember
it just makes me wonder about everything that we learn. I mean, sure, if you go into medical school, it helps to have a certain set of knowledge, but it makes me wonder about business school. It makes me wonder about all the psychology, all the things that we discount because we think it has to go a certain way. And when we're seeing the reality, we discount the truth of it because we're taking some learning that we had over our own intuition and brains and scrappiness, really. So I don't know. It really makes me question so many things. Hey, I want to make sure that we get to talk about the wedding dresses just a little bit more, and maybe just because this just launched your new business. And actually, let's start with the title of it, if you would.
Yeah, sure.
People We Love.
Oh, Humans We Love.
Humans We Love. Yeah.
It's
I do a lot.
Yeah. Yes. I do the same thing. I'll think of I'll try to remember the name of a movie and it will be like the same meaning, but like different words.
Right. But I'm interviewing you and I know the name, so I should have had it. But anyway, okay.
So Humans We Love. The idea is that we're celebrating humans we love, whether it's someone that you are choosing as your life partner and celebrating in a wedding, or you could be celebrating your mom or your best friend or whoever. And so those are the humans we love, and they are being celebrated with art made by humans we love. So it is focusing then on the artists and the artisans who are either making elements that I'm including in the gowns. Like I have a gown called the Lovebird Collage gown, and there is a woman in Ukraine who she hand embroiders animals like cranes and phoenix birds and the koi fish, and she hand embroiders them. They're stunning. She designs and hand embroiders them. This is very uncommon. Typically what would happen is someone may come up with a design, then they give it to a factory and the factory will produce it. So the designer and the maker are not the same typically. And
in this case they are.
In this case they are. And she's also like supporting her family in the Ukraine.
She's here. She's in the US right now.
She's in the Ukraine.
Yeah. Oh, right now she's in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Oh.
She's in Ukraine right now with her family, supporting her family. And so I have found artists like her around the world that are making exceptional art with their hands.
Wow.
And then I'm incorporating them. I have, I've been like, for like months before I started the actual design process, I just focused on discovery. I just focused on like really noticing like who is creating something really beautiful and you can feel their heart in it. And then gathering all of that, just have them send me like samples or whatever. And then just like, I found this incredible couturier, this amazing woman named Mika in New York City who makes one of a kind wedding gowns. And we connected right away. She loves dogs and loves anime and she's so fun. And I just take all these like art pieces plus all the zero waste that I've been collecting of fabrics from like, you know, fashion lines when they end up with an extra bolt of fabric or vintage lace or whatever. And I just look at it and I just have it speak to me of like, you know, what can this become? And so like the collage gown I made is like, and I feel really silly because I'll be like, I know this isn't really how you're supposed to design, you know, like it's supposed to be like, oh, you find the trend and then you make the thing or whatever. But I'm like looking at these animals and I'm like, to
everybody does that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But when I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, it's as if all of these animals have found each other and they get to spend their life together because there's this one bird that is singing and she's singing in the middle. This like one bird is singing this song. And to me, it's like this bird is singing this song of love. And therefore all of the couples could find each other to spend their life together. And so that became that dress.
It's
and I
so much more than a garment. It's a complete story. It's a complete, it supports all these people. It connotates love. You know, there's so much more than just a garment here. It's just really, I've never heard fashion described this way ever before. I would have been a lot more interested if I thought you could do all those amazing things with. But are these
so
out of the realm of most people's pocketbook, would you say? I mean, obviously they're custom creations.
Actually, for a wedding gown, they're in a pretty reasonable price point. So
are they really?
Yeah,
wow.
It's kind of surprising. So one thing that's exciting is whenever I would look at starting a new garment collection, like when I was running Vogue, you know, we added swimwear, we added evening gowns, etc. You have to look at you know, all the costs and also like in addition to the cost of the materials, which typically are way more expensive because we're doing it at a small scale versus the large scale like conventional fabrics. So that already is more expensive. In addition, then there's the labor, and the more complicated the gown, the more expensive the labor. But what I realized, and so every time I look at a new business idea, I have to think like, okay, first I have my dream in my heart. I also have my dream of like the impact. But then I have to be like, practically speaking, like this has to be something that
makes sense.
Some sort of, you know, makes sense price point that people can use in their life. It's useful to them. And so when I started Vote, I was like, okay, I have to look at how much are Bloomingdale's coats and then what kind of quality in terms of the warmth and the look and feel, and how can I match that, but also make it for the environment and vegan and, you know, whatever, all that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like a crushing equation. You have to like,
exactly.
Be like, how do I still do all of those things? You know,
because nobody else can.
It's just it's so much more. And that's why I think the holistic approach, while theoretically is ideal, is there are so few people who even attempt it because every new way of innovating is more expensive just by means of doing it at a smaller scale. And so basically, I actually have been able to make them at, you know, they're like 1,500 to like 5,000.
Oh, you're kidding.
They're made to order. So for a wedding gown,
unbelievable.
You know, I
can't believe they're that inexpensive.
Most of them are around like 3,000 on average. And, you know, I can do more like one of a kind couture or whatever that will cost more because it would take a long time and etc. But these are few of a kind couture. They're made to order. And some of them are made to measure. So I was very excited that I did, when I did the math, I was like, oh,
we can do this.
We're actually in a normal price point.
Just beyond exciting. Has it been received well already? Because when you just launched like a month or two ago, right?
Just launched. I also moved cross country right after that. So I will say, in addition to the gowns, I also have vegan wedding shoes that a couple of my friends' brands I focus on.
Oh, fun.
So like
I didn't know this one yours.
I mean, they're not mine, but I'm carrying theirs to go with the gowns. That's a great idea. And then also some ethically made engagement and wedding jewelry, which are made by I have two female designers. One is Ciara, she's actually vegan from birth. She's in London, and she makes a beautiful handmade wedding and engagement rings that are using antique and vintage stones and they're amazing. And then Tamsin, she's in New York, and she also makes very beautiful ethical engagement rings and jewelry.
So they can plan their whole wedding, because somebody who wants to find a gown like that is ethically made and all the rest, zero waste. I mean, that's not an easy thing to find, but then to find all these other things because if they want that, they're going to want the other things that are along the same line. So that it's fantastic that you've really blossomed that line out. So it can be sort of a beginning to end.
And I,
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. Just one more thing. So I am also building out right now a vegan bridal guide that will go on it as well. And I remember, I talked to Jess about hers, which was so incredible.
She did one.
And so helpful to so many brides. And so, and it's just nice because I know people need to know like what are all these different elements. So just to get some updated things to go with it. But there was a question you asked.
Well, I'm gonna ask you another one second, but then we can wrap up. I just wanted to say, because my daughter Jessie and her husband had a fully vegan wedding from the entire thing, and I'm going to forget how long they've been married. I think 5 years. I can't believe how many people still talk to me about that. Like it was such a great example of what you can do by being ethical the whole way through. And nothing is harmed. And all the food was vegan and unbelievable food. And clothing and everything. I don't think the gown was though, because I don't know. They didn't have those in the.
No, I'm sure she did. Knowing her, I'm sure she found like an accidentally vegan gown.
But maybe she accidentally vegan. Sure. Yeah, that's probably the term that we're looking for.
But I mean that is a very good point. Like, I always think that any time that you're going to be orchestrating something large, and therefore you're paying for what people are eating, and you're also giving them a chance to try something. I feel like that's the best opportunity for people to just get over that hump of like, is this doable? Like, will I
is it weird?
A boring life? Will I hate I hate my life? And it's like, no, actually,
it's so much more.
It's really fun and it's really exciting to like explore and find all of these like incredible like creators who are each focusing on different elements and supporting artisans and whatever. And so I've noticed that a lot of the people that I found out have gone vegan from us interacting were because they were like a model I hired for a photo shoot, and we had vegan food on set. We had vegan makeup, we had vegan hair, and we were all vegan. And they were like, oh, this is
a thing.
This feels right.
And it's cool. And it's something like that they want no matter what, right? Like your clothing, like they're going to want the clothing regardless of what the story is, but to know the story kind of empowers you to just go maybe make those choices elsewhere, which is fantastic.
That's right.
Do you have any advice for someone else who or for consumers basically that are like trying to transition to a more ethical lifestyle, a sustainable wardrobe? Like where do they start? Where do you start?
I mean, that's a big question.
Yeah, it kind of is.
I think that if I start with more of the fashion direction of like, how do they start having an ethical fashion wardrobe? I will say that, there's a misnomer that an ethical fashion wardrobe is more expensive. And the reason why that's a misnomer is because people see that, making something amazing start to finish may be more expensive for purchasing that item, like a pair of shoes, by like my friend Joshua's brand, Brave Gentleman, etc. But what's really going on is two things. One, you are purchasing something that will last a long time. So you are going to get a lot of uses out of it. If you think of the purchase price per use. But for someone who has a small budget, which as an entrepreneur who, paid myself last, which I know is like against the rules and I need to work on that.
Since when did rules matter to you, right?
I know, but you just have to make your life sustainable, right? So I'm definitely working on that. But I will say that, I always had a very strict budget. And the way that I was able to create my wardrobe ethically was by thrifting 95% of my wardrobe. And previous to that, before I knew anything about fast fashion, even though I was always purchasing accidentally vegan clothes, I was buying everything from the mall, and I had no idea what an impact that made, both the disposability as well as the like labor the labor issues and the environmental issues. And so purchasing from thrift stores, if you buy 90% of your wardrobe from a thrift store, from thrift stores, and then 10% from businesses that are actively setting up systems on a small scale to create positive impact through the people that they employ to create the clothing, through the fabric suppliers that they work with, through all of that, then you're investing in a system that can grow and create change and positive impact. At the same time, you're still, making use of waste from thrifting, and your total wardrobe budget will be the same price as just buying everything from the mall, which then you have to throw away. You'd be donating anyway pretty soon, when the trend changes.
That was really a great answer. And honestly, I just read, I think yesterday, that we have enough right now, enough clothing on the planet right now to clothe the next 6 generations. I mean, it's ridiculous. And people when you say thrift store, I hope people also understand that doesn't just mean, and nothing against Goodwill, but it's not just going to Goodwill or ARC. It's also going to consignment stores. That's where I get a lot of my clothing is consignment stores. And there's some very high fashion consignment stores. So it doesn't mean that you have to, get the least possible price or the least fashionable or whatever. There's so many options in buying clothing that's already been used. I bought things that have been even still have the tag on or have barely ever been worn. And
absolutely.
And maybe they're a third of the original price. And I love doing that. It's my favorite.
And that's a very good point because, not everybody loves like the more of like a indie Brooklyn look. Which I like. I've lived in Brooklyn for the past 13 years. But you can wear pretty much any style you want, knowing exactly what you just said, that if there's enough fashion on this planet for, would you say 6 generations? Then
horribly, yes.
If that's the case, then that means that
it's out there.
It's all out there. It's just a matter of, instead of being such a blind consumer that we just, go consume online whatever people tell us to buy and buy it on Amazon. If instead we're like, let me just take a minute to find what I'm looking for. There are so many ways to purchase clothing that it may even be new with tags, and it could also have been used or worn or maybe made in the 50s and it's still in incredible condition. I have some wedding gowns that are vintage from the 50s and 40s that I'm going to be using parts of them to create new gowns. And you can buy clothes on Poshmark. You can buy a brand new swimsuit that someone couldn't return and get it for half the price or whatever, It's
just a smarter way.
It's just a community way of looking at things. It's like us as a community supporting each other versus the industry giants
telling us what to
controlling everything. Exactly.
Our food, our clothing, our everything, our cars.
That's right.
We're definitely moving, I think, back in that direction, but we have to move it too. It doesn't move on its own accord. And
that's right.
Honestly, you've presented so many beautiful ways of looking at things. I think we'll definitely move the ball down the road because it's so much how you say it. You can beat someone over the head and say, don't do this, or you can show a more beautiful way of doing it. Like I'm always quoting, Charles Eisenstein, imagining the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. Isn't that beautiful? That's the name of his book. And it's just how we need to always think about that. What is the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible? So I think that's what you're doing, and you're doing it beautifully. And I will definitely put the website on there for Humans We Love and encourage people. Go ahead.
Can I say something real quick? So one thing that I am working on right now, since I'm in Portland, which I realized could be a good addition to Humans We Love, is a friend had asked me, I was just on a trip for my friend's birthday, and one of her friends had asked me actually, do you do anything that's not for bridal? And I was like, I could just make like everyday gowns like that I make. And so I'm actually working right now on like more of like a everyday price point.
Hmm.
Instead of like a couture made to
Right.
order gown.
Mm-hmm.
But to create some zero waste vegan dresses and gowns that are more for someone
Mm.
to wear and like feel so like ethereal in their life. And I have all these beautiful fabrics, especially the ones that aren't like white or more of a traditional bridal.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I can utilize those. So I will be
Wow.
launching those soon in Portland, in person. But I will also add them to the website. They'll be under Made by Leanne. So there's like the couture, there's Humans We Love, and then I'm doing a sub collection, which is things that
Okay.
I'm actually physically making, which will be at a much lower price point because they won't be couture.
But
And
you're
they'll also
making
be
them.
things that's true, but they'll also be things that people can wear, not needing to have like a wedding
Right. Sure.
or a special like red carpet moment to wear
So
them.
where do you find all of these? Is there an umbrella website that
Oh
we
yeah,
need
it
to
will
let
be.
people know about?
I will be adding Made by Land to Humans We Love. That will be up
So it'll
soon.
all be under humanswelove.com, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would
Yeah. Exactly.
definitely, put links to that in the show notes.
Great.
Leanne, thank you so much. This has just been very exciting for me,
Oh,
very
you're so
insightful
sweet.
and inspirational. So I hope
Thank you
that,
so
other
much.
people will find it. And I wish you all the
Thanks.
best luck in building your
Yeah.
businesses and saving the
Thank
world.
you. Oh, you're
All
so sweet.
right.
This was so fun. You're so lovely. And I just really enjoyed just
Thank
exploring all of
you.
these ideas with you.
It's fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
really
was really,
fun.
really fun. Thank you
All
so much
right.
for
Well,
having me.
hopefully we'll meet
Appreciate
in
it.
person one of these
Yeah, I
days.
would love that. You're in
Yeah.
Colorado, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
I am
cool.
now.
Yes, I
So
need to visit at some point for sure.
absolutely. All right. Take
All right.
care. Have a
You
lovely
too.
day. All right.
Thanks, you
Bye
too.
bye. Sure.
Bye.
Bye.